Hi, my name is Kelly Meraz, and I am the General Music PLC lead for the Georgia Department of Education. The topic of today's video is teaching instruments of the orchestra using active music making strategies. This is a really important part of our standards, teaching instruments of the orchestra in a grade level appropriate way. But I think it can be a struggle not to just turn it into a lecture or watching a bunch of videos. Now, I agree that kids should be watching videos of masterful musicians playing the instruments. A lot of times, there are free programs available from orchestras that can really give you great visuals, both of individual instruments, instrument families, instruments in the entire orchestra. So I do think videos are integral, but I also like to find active music making strategies that can be applied from grades K all the way up to 8. Hopefully this will help you also think of some active music making strategies. So what I like to do, especially with my younger learners, K through 3, is use movement activities. So we do creative movement to classical music all the time in here. And what we can do with that is to reinforce form, and we can reinforce timbre. So we can talk about the sound of the woodwinds or the sound of the string instruments. And of course, when we're doing this creative movement, it's very important to reinforce form. So that involves a little bit of work on your part, listening to the piece of music you want to use and really mapping out that form. If it's a very complicated form, you might want to think about a different piece or think about a way to explain that form to your students. So if the A section comes back at the end, but there are modifications, you can talk about what those are. That would be really helpful. Also, you can isolate instruments or families. So you can find pieces that use specific families, or you can find arrangements by different chamber ensembles. So I, for example, did a movement activity using a piece by the Canadian Brass, because they're a really great brass ensemble. So we did it was the Carmen Toreador March, and I diagrammed the form, I created movements for each section, and we talked about the timbres that we heard, the trumpets, the French horns, the trombones. You could probably also find a video recording of that piece, and the kids could watch the Canadian Brass play it, but I really like to have them move around. For the A section we marched, and for the B section I think we made circles with our ribbons. And so it really reinforces form to your students, but also allows them to enjoy those timbres separately. So if you find a piece you really like, you might want to incorporate a brass ensemble or a string quartet or maybe a percussion ensemble. There are lots of percussion ensemble arrangements of classical pieces and other pieces. So it's really fun to get the kids to kind of zero in on those timbres. And then, of course, another way you can do this is with active listening. So there's lots of ways I do this in my classroom. There's probably lots of ways you do this in your classroom. I would love it if you would share those ways in the discussion board. If you're able to share a file of something you've created, that would be amazing as well. One of the easiest ways to go about this is with listening maps. I've put a couple of examples here on the slide, just things that I made up really easily. I don't know if you can tell, but the first one with the chickens goes to Ballet of the Unhatched Chicks from Pictures at an Exhibition by Mussorgsky. And so I just made it really simple. I used this in kindergarten. And so we have the chicks in the shells running around. In the middle, we have a contrasting section, a B section. That's the rooster, and the rooster gets to walk around and inspect all the chicks and make sure nobody's doing the wrong thing. And then it goes back to the chicks running around, and at the end we all make a happy chicken pose. So these are very simple ideas, especially with kindergarten and first grade. But if you present it to them visually, they really get to understand those elemental forms. So of course this song goes A, B, A with a special ending, which I will label as coda when we get a little bit older. So again, you're laying down that foundation of form, which again is in our standards. In K and 1, they need to start to be able to identify repeating sections and contrasting sections, and this is a really great way to do it visually. Also, you'll notice there is no text in that first example. So this is a great strategy to help your English language learners because they all know what is in the picture and they can identify the different sections. So you're taking away a layer of language that's going to make their processing a lot easier, especially for our younger English language learners. The other listening map I have here is for a piece by Leroy Anderson called The Syncopated Clock. Leroy Anderson's music is a gold mine for form and for keeping young musicians engaged. So I made this myself. It's a simple rondo. That A theme comes back a lot and it sounds like a clock. So I put a picture of a clock. The B section is slow and not slow, but it's legato. And so we make, rainbows with our scarves or long connected shapes with our bodies. It goes back to A. The C section, in my classroom, we do this with ribbons and we wiggle the ribbons. So I thought that was a good picture for wiggly ribbons. And then it goes back to A. And then here you'll see I have labeled the coda and it says go crazy because in the music, it sounds like the clock is breaking down. And so we just wiggle our wiggles out and then we freeze at the end to reinforce that final point. It's super fun. I made this in about 10 minutes. You can make them too, but I really do encourage listening maps. It will keep the kids engaged. It will help make sense to them. And again, if you've got children who have trouble processing language or English language learners, this is a very easy way for them to experience form. You could also make a listening map with pictures of instruments. So if you find a piece where the strings are section A, you could put pictures of violins and cellos and basses. If you find a song where the brass are taking over in section B, you could put pictures of brass instruments. And that's another way you could teach instruments of the orchestra, is to kind of identify them by sound and then by sight. Creating a visual score is a lot of fun. I do this with my kids a lot, and it's really interesting the things they come up with. So, for example, let's say we were doing Carnival of the Animals. I like Carnival of the Animals for a lot of reasons. Let's say we're listening to the kangaroo. So what I did was I made a quick little visual score here. You can kind of see it. So when the kangaroo's hopping, we have short lines, hop, 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 bum, bum, and there's a bit of a pause, and then there's more hopping, hop, 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 and then there's more pausing, and then at the end, the kangaroo hops, 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 and then we have the end. And if you're familiar with the piece, it kind of ends with a little piano arpeggio up. Your kids can absolutely do this. And what's really nice is as they get older, those can be transferred into more advanced visual skills. So sometimes I will block a paper out into boxes and I'll say, okay, here's your A, your B, your C, whatever form you have. Can you draw shapes what you're hearing? Can you draw the instruments you're hearing? And then we can go and look at the sections. And if A comes back, we go back and look at A. And eventually, as they get older, when they get to, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, what you can do is then teach them, well, musicians are looking at something called a score. It's a real thing. And you can pop up a real orchestral score and show them how the conductor follows the map. There are lots of great YouTube videos where you can follow along with an orchestra piece and the score is on the screen, which is a great way, again, to show the kids the different timbres, the different instruments, and how it follows across the page. And then the last way I just find a lot of fun is instrument stories. So Peter and the Wolf is a classic. And what I did was I made a storybook for my youngest learners. It's called Peter and the Wolf. They put their name here. And as we're listening to the story, we are drawing the pictures. So they're using their imagination. Talk about the instruments representing the characters, the flute with the bird, the duck with the oboe, the cat with the clarinet. And then they're drawing along. So here I say, one day Peter went into the meadow and met a bird. Peter and the bird met a duck and a cat. And I just basically go through the whole story. By the end, they have illustrated everything, and then they fold it into a nice storybook. I'm happy to share this file with whoever would like it. But what I find is if they're just listening, their minds will wander, and they won't really all get the full effect of the story. But if they're drawing pictures, then they have to listen to the story. And it's funny because I find my students will hear that flute, and they'll say, oh, the bird's coming. And they'll draw a little picture of a bird. And so they're starting to identify those instrument timbres much quicker because they're engaged in the story absolutely fully. You can create your own instrument stories, especially with older learners. Take a folk tale, take a fairy tale. There are many to choose from, and have the students assign instruments to the characters and justify it. Why do you think the trombone should represent the elephant or whatever? And really building those literacy skills as well. And then you can have them creating their own instrument stories, which would be a lot of fun too. I hope you got some ideas. I would love it if you would share your ideas about how you get kids actively engaged and learning about instruments of the orchestra. And we'll see you for the next video. Thank you so much for watching.